What is it with them always referring to the Freedom Convoy as the so-called Freedom Convoy? Like every time that you read about it in a mainstream source, it's always the so-called, which means, which implies that it wasn't about freedom. The so-called Freedom Convoy. I think everybody agrees it was a convoy. So the part that they don't agree on is the freedom part. So really, it wasn't about freedom. Justin Trudeau is the most tyrannical, authoritarian government that Canada's ever had, like by about 1,000,000 miles. This would have been totally unimaginable, like even 5 years ago it would have been unimaginable. And if you want to wonder, if you want to wonder, who wrote the book of love? It wasn't Justin Trudeau, I can promise you that. If you're wondering, is he a tyrant? What did he do when there was protest against this tyranny? He responded with more tyranny. The convoy was a freedom convoy, okay? Not a so-called freedom convoy. It was a freedom convoy. God, that drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely insane. So-called freedom convoy. Wow. Did we do the rules for radicals thing? I mean, you're going to put forward a kind of a rational argument to say, well, probably shouldn't call it a so-called freedom convoy because it really was about standing up for freedom and all that. So you can make this kind of argument, like I'm doing right now, actually. But what you need to do is you need to shock them. You need to shock them. You need to do surprising and funny things, which Canadians were admired for quite a while, They wouldn't let us bring gas into the convoy, and so they just started showing up with like hundreds of gas cans. Some of them might have been full with gas, some might have had water, some of them might be empty, and they just showed up with too many gas cans to check. That was really a brilliant one. Okay, here's a good one. Not related to COVID, but this would have been quite interesting. Maybe it would backfire, But what we need to do is we need to throw a lot of stuff at them. And humorous things that really go to the heart of a situation would really do it. Okay, so there was a meeting in Toronto a while ago, white females got together to talk about the problems with racism and how, different races do very poorly in regard to poverty and things like that, whatever. And so what would have been interesting would have been to go downtown, this was in Toronto, I believe, to go down Toronto and find a bunch of homeless white men and gotten them to write up a poster carried around that said homeless white male or privileged white male or whatever. Just get them to go down there and maybe give them, a couple of pages of documents about how little sense these people make when they show up there, eat their crab cakes and listen to each other and talk and waste our money. We're paying them to do this. So we could have just, probably could have pretty easily found like 200 or 300 homeless people to go down and protest the event. Or to go down there saying that they were in support of it. Right? Like, they're homeless white men. They can totally understand how privileged white men are. I mean, just look around. How many of the homeless people are white men? So with the so-called Freedom Convoy, I don't know, man. How could you make a joke out of them calling it a so-called... Oh, okay. The so-called Prime Minister of Canada went and talked about his so-called support for this and that, and Okay, in the rules for radicals thing, what they did is like do really shocking things. Like uh, blacks were invited to an opera or something, so they got them to all eat beans and then fart their way through the whole opera. It's a disgusting way to do it, but just to rattle them, they need to be rattled. They need to have protests outside their indoctrination centers. It's funny that they haven't come up with that, like, because there's a trucker convoy. Trucker convoys are happening all the time. They just don't make the news. They're happening in every city in Canada. They're operating in Ottawa right now. And the information doesn't get out. There's no way to find out where the Freedom Convoy is happening in your city like 3 days from now, unless you're really well connected, I guess. There's very little coverage of them after they happen. So they're common, they're happening, they're everywhere, and that would be a good opportunity to use some rules for radicals advice. Like, what could you do showing up there? Like, is this something funny? Well, it would be posters, right? Could be more imaginative with posters. I'm not experiencing a particularly imaginative moment right now. So, yeah, I'm drawing a blank. But it's going to have to involve going to the university. That's what has to happen. The problem is that the university students will be, some of them will be violent. You can be guaranteed of that. So you want to take that responsibility on? Yeah, you antagonize them, right? I guess it's their responsibility for being the way they are, I suppose. But like, if you poke a vicious dog, is it the dog's fault if he bites a bunch of people? Kind of your fault, isn't it? So you go to the university and you poke these people and they wind up biting somebody, and then it's on you, isn't it, in a way? Because you know they're crazy. You know they're crazy. You go and antagonize them. They do something violent. It's kind of on you, isn't it? Oh, I know what it is. I know a good one. Do you love the unvaccinated? Do you love the unvaccinated? Jesse Lee Peterson used to say, he would ask black people, do you love white people? And to a person, they never, ever came out and said yes. Not that I heard. But he interviews the